Where the Wild Things Are. Story and pictures by Maurice Sendak. HarperCollins Publishers, copyright 1963. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind. And another, chasing the poor dog with a fork. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. And grew. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines, and the walls became the world all around. You see his room. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through the night and day. The boat's called Max. And in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. He was gone a long time. And when he came to a place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still!" and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. And made him king of all the wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." They danced under the full moon. And they climbed all around all the trees. And they gave him a piggyback ride as he was the king of the wild things. "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around, from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We'll love you so." And Max said no. The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped in his private boat and waved goodbye and sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day. And into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. The end. The Story of Ferdinand by Monroe Leaf. Drawings by Robert Lawson. Published by Puffin Books. First published by the Viking Press in 1936. Once upon a time in Spain, there was a little bull, and his name was Ferdinand. All the other little bulls he lived with would run and jump and butt their heads together. But not Ferdinand. He liked to sit just quietly and smell the flowers. He had a favorite spot out in the pasture under their cork tree. It was his favorite tree, and he would sit in its shade all day and smell the flowers. Sometimes his mother, who was a cow, would worry about him. She was afraid he would be lonesome all by himself. "Why don't you run and play with the other little bulls? Skip and butt your head," she would say. But Ferdinand would shake his head. "I like it better here, where I can just sit quietly and smell the flowers." His mother saw that he was not lonesome, and because she was an understanding mother, even though she was a cow, she let him just sit there and be happy. As the years went by, Ferdinand grew and grew until he was very big and strong. All the other bulls who had grown up with him in the same pasture would fight each other all day. They would butt each other and stick each other with their horns. What they wanted most of all was to be picked to fight in the bullfights in Madrid. Ooh, nasty. But not Ferdinand. He still liked to sit quietly under the cork tree and smell the flowers. One day, 5 men came in very funny hats to pick the biggest, fastest, roughest bull to fight in the bullfights in Madrid. All the other bulls ran around snorting and butting and leaping and jumping so the men would think they were very, very strong, fierce, and pick them. Ferdinand knew that they wouldn't pick him, and he didn't care, so he went out to his favorite cork tree to sit down. He didn't look where he was sitting, and instead of sitting on a nice cool grass in the shade, he sat on a bumblebee. Uh-oh. Well, if you were a bumblebee and a bull sat on you, what would you do? You would sting him, and that's just what this bee did to Ferdinand. Look at the look on his face. Yikes. Wow, did it hurt. Ferdinand jumped up with a snort. He ran around puffing and snorting and butting and pawing the ground as if he were crazy. The 5 men saw him, and they all shouted with joy. Here was the largest and fierce bull of all, just the one for the bullfights in Madrid. So they took him away for the bullfight the day in a cart. What a day it was. Flags were flying, bands were playing, and all the lovely ladies had flowers in their hair. They had a parade into the bull ring. First came the bandoleros, with long sharp pins with ribbons on them to stick the bull and make him mad. That's not very nice. Next came the picadors, who rode skinny horses, and they had long spears to stick the bull and make him madder. Oh, that's even worse. Then came the matador, the proudest of all. He thought he was handsome and bowed to the ladies. He had a red cape and a sword and was supposed to stick the bull last of all. Then came the bull. And you know who that bull was, don't you? Ferdinand. They called him Ferdinand the Fierce, and all the bandoleros were afraid of him, and the picadors were afraid of him, and the matador was scared stiff. Ferdinand ran into the middle of the ring, and everyone shouted and clapped because they thought he was going to fight fiercely and butt and snort and stick his horns around. But not Ferdinand. When he got to the middle of the ring, he saw the flowers in all the lovely ladies' hair, and he just sat down quietly and smelled. He wouldn't fight and be fierce no matter what they did. He sat and smelled, and the bandoleros were mad, and the picadors were madder, and the matador was so mad he cried because he couldn't show off his cape and sword. So they had to take Ferdinand home. And for all I know, he is sitting there still under his favorite cork tree, smelling the flowers just quietly. He is very happy. The end.